Hey guys, it's Meg, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking my Mistweaver through a 21 Sanguine depths. You can find all of my stat weights in the top left corner, my legendary in the top right, I'm running Tear of Morning, and my trinkets and talent choices in the bottom right corner by the damage meters. The conduits I'm using are Jade Bond, Dizzying Tumble, Harm Denial, and Bone Marrow Hops. In this run I also did try to experiment a little bit with some of my stat weights. I'm running way more mastery than I normally would, about 30-25%. Normally I would split that up into haste and crit, but I did want to try a higher mastery build for this instance. And one last note before we get started, we actually don't have a Venthyr player with us in the party, so our dungeon will be done without the use of the lanterns. Setting up for our first pull here, I went ahead and used Thunder Focus Tea and 2 stacks of Renewing Mist applied to myself and the tank. I'm also going to Fleshcraft and throw in my Bone Dust Brew, and then pop Crane and start spinning. I use Crane here because this is a decent sized pull. I'm also not going to need it for the next 3 minutes. Unfortunately, as you can see there, I did get caught by a storming and I got thrown into a trap which killed me, but my group is just fine without me with the use of Ring of Peace, and then I'm also going to drop my Ring of Peace here while I stabilize from dying. As we're finishing up this pull, you should be checking your mana and what cooldowns you have. You should also be looking for how many stacks of renewing going into the next pull, just to kind of see what you have to work with. This next pull isn't anything too scary, but we do have an inspiring ad, so it is something to keep mind of. Make sure that you're trying to conserve your mana as much as you can here. On a pull like this with the Mist Dancers in particular, I recommend dropping your Transcendence out in ranged, or out maybe even a bit further than that depending on which way you're kiting, just in case you get in trouble and need to get back in a safe spot for one of those frontals. That's fairly important on a week like this as well. With storming, you may get caught up in the air and the timings just don't work out, but if you do have Transcendence drops before that happens, you're able to save yourself and the pull. I decided right here would be a good time to take a break from melee because of all the tornadoes, the frontals, and the traps. Ranged is just a bit safer and I'm still able to effectively heal from ranged. Once it begins to clear up though, I am working on getting right back into melee. Coming out of Shroud here, you're going to want to try and sit and drink as much as you can before the next pull starts. You can see we have Crane coming off of cooldown. We use it at the very beginning of the first hallway on the first pull, and here we have it available again, but we are going to be holding it until Prideful or the pull right before Prideful, depending on how your DPS are managing their own cooldowns. I do end up having to use Cocoon here because I was knocked into the air and wasn't able to heal up quite as quickly as I would have liked. Normally, Cocoon I'd like to hold for Pridefuls or for the boss. Right about now is where you want to start thinking about where you want each of your cooldowns for the boss, for Prideful, and for this next pull coming up. We wanted to get a quick drink here while we CC our Inspiring, and our mage has decided that he's going to combust here and on the Prideful. That means that I am free to use Crane here and then have it for when I need it during the boss. Do your best here to save Diffuse, Revival, Fort Brute, and Cocoon. You're going to definitely want them for the next boss. As you're finishing up Prideful here, you do want to try and get some of your Renewing Mists out and get those extended for the first Hungering Drain tick on this first boss here. I've got about 40 seconds left on my Crane cooldown. I personally prefer to use Crane in the second portion because that's when the damage really starts to ramp up. You'll also want to have it for the mana saving aspect as your Prideful buff will drop off by then. So it's a really nice cooldown to use in the second half of this fight. As our first Severing Smash is coming up, I am trying to make sure that I have hots on all of my party members, and then you're also going to want to roll out. I used my Fleshcraft a bit late. I would have liked to use it earlier so I could benefit from some of that absorb as well, but I did manage to get the DR cast off. I ended up using Revival there as I eat the orbs. I have 3 hots rolling on my party right now, and as each orb gets eaten, I cast a couple of Vivifies just to keep people topped. I did end up popping Crane, Bubble, and Fort here. I'm starting my ramp for the next Severing Smash here in about 6 seconds. I want to make sure that I can get all of the orbs in before our Juggernaut rush, so Crane is going to be putting in its work here. On a fight like this especially, don't underestimate the value of Expel Harm. If you're using the Conduit, it does about as much as a health pot. As you can see, I use Expel Harm to get me up to about 60-65%, and then I health pot the rest of the way up, so I can use the rest of my abilities on my party to try and top them before the Hungering Drain. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to top my friends fast enough, so instead of killing everyone with the charge, I just rolled out and died solo so they could continue to kill the boss and I could just release right here. An unfortunate death right there. I did get hit by storming and then I took 4 dark bolts, so there's not really much I could have done about that. I think even if I had used Expel Harm, I probably still would have died. I went ahead and used Crane on this pull because, as you can see, there is an Inspiring, and then I also don't really need it for the next couple of minutes, so I'm safe to use it here. Here I am trying to get a quick drink off before we head into the suppressor pack. I'm also going to drop my Transcendence in the corner as a line of sight to break the chains and any kicks that may be going off. I do end up using Mana Tea here because I couldn't get a full drink off, and the longer you are in this fight, the harder it is to heal. Here I Transcend to break that chain and also line of sight any of the curses or anything that may be going off on me that aren't going to get kicked. For this Prideful, I do have Crane available, but I am going to go ahead and hold on to it because we're going to have a bigger pull after this. I go ahead and use Crane here because we're going to have the damage from the casters going out, we have quite a bit of tank damage going out from the Warden, and then we also have Storming taking people down as well. A Barb Shackle got off on our Boomkin, so I went ahead and used Cocoon on him there just to help deal with some of that damage while I can't cast with Storming. And unfortunately, this is not the first time that this has happened to me. As soon as that mob died, the cast did end up getting off, but because the mob was dead, there was no graphic for the explosive vellum. It ended up catching me, but we get me up quickly and move on. This Prideful is our last pull before the second boss. I end up using Revival here, but again, do your best to save all of your cooldowns for the boss. We're going to handle this first boss similar to how we handled the second. We're going to make sure that we have a lot of our renewings out and some of our hots rolling for this first ad here. Because we have Prideful and Lust, I am just going to go ahead and heal the first ad phase normally. There goes Crane, and then we have our next ad coming out in a couple of seconds here. I just want to get some of our enveloping rolling and my ramp started, so when that damage starts to come out, we're ready for it. Make sure for the duration of this fight that you are keeping your renewings refreshed and that you are extending them with Rising Sun Kick, because it's incredibly hard to catch up if you let all of them fall off and you end up with an ad. Having an ad with no hots out is actually a very, very dangerous situation, especially in this case where we don't have revival. Here we're backtracking to pull the mini-boss from the room that we had shrouded initially. We just wanted to make sure that our Prideful is lined up. This isn't going to be too heavy healing, it's going to be a lot of single target on your tank from the Custodian, but other than that you should be able to conserve mana fairly well, and you shouldn't need to use too many cooldowns here, especially coming out of that last boss where you used most of them. Here we are pulling some mobs from further down the hallway into the last portion of that Custodian, just because it is a lot of tank damage and he's able to handle both this ad and the next ones that we're pulling. During this pull, I do end up having to use a mana pot. This is okay because we had no plans to use invis pots, but it is something to keep in mind as it is a 5-minute cooldown, just in case you don't have a rogue. Going into this next pack, you'll see I do try to use Fortified Brew as I take some pretty heavy damage out of nowhere. It is on cooldown, so I end up using Crane and Expel Harm to get myself back up. This is a really good pack to use Crane on because you're going to be using a lot of AoE healing, both between the Explosive Rages that get off and the Throw Research. It's just a lot of AoE damage, so you're going to get some really, really good value out of Crane on this fight. I also do end up using Revival here as I get pushed out of melee. Just about now I'm starting to think what I want for the boss versus what I want for Prideful. You shouldn't need to use too many cooldowns, if any, on these 2 packs prior to Prideful. Going into this Pride here, I have full hots up and I have let my party know that I am not going to be using cooldowns here, and I also expect them to not use any defensives because they will need them for this next boss we're going into. Alright, and now as our first rite is going out, we're going to make sure that we are collecting orbs. I have 3 hots rolling that will be there for when I need the healing. I had a little bit of trouble getting a hold of some orbs here, so I did end up having to use Diffuse a little bit earlier than I normally would. I throw down Bone Dust Brew as soon as that goes down. I use Cocoon on our Boomkin, who's our lowest, and then I start Vivifying before I have to start moving. That was also Revival, and then this is going to be some more Vivify spam. I'm back into rolling my hots. Going into our next rites again, we are going to be using our Thunder Focus Tea for our renewing, so we get a little bit longer uptime on that one, so we don't have to worry about refreshing that one when all of the damage is happening. We have 3 hots out right now. Again, I'm fighting some people for orbs, so I end up having to use the ones for the mages because he is going to be ice blocking. I use my Fleshcraft along with 2 orbs to live that. The only problem with that is that I now don't have any defensives going into this Endless Torment, so I am going to be a little bit low. It gets a bit scary here, but we do end up stabilizing. Crane is coming out for this next Iron Spikes and to top everyone for our next Rite of Supremacy, so we can get that healing up, and then we can carry that over into the movement portion. Right here I am using Expel Harm myself, and then I went ahead and used my Quantum Device on the Boomkin because he was our lowest there, and that healed him to full, allowing me to focus on some other people, allowing them to kill the boss. The most important part here is to make sure that no one of your group walks over this bridge until you are able to get down and drink. You can see I go over to the right as soon as we enter, and I'm sitting before anyone even crosses that bridge because that's what triggers combat. You really want to make sure that you can get as close to full as possible starting this gauntlet because you won't be able to drink for a while, and as a Mistweaver, that is very bad news. You're not going to have Crane going into this pull, unfortunately. Normally I like to make sure that I do, but we moved pretty quick through that other pull, so we are just going to be using our other cooldowns like Fort Brew, Cocoon, and Revival just to stay alive here. On a pull like this where you don't have Crane, you are going to want to be using your Mana Tea. You don't want to get too greedy with this because you're going to regret it later on. You might as well use it now, get it on cooldown, get the benefit, and then have it up again later. I do get innervated here. I didn't call for it, I didn't really need it, but it will be off of cooldown by the time that I need it again because I do have Crane up. I also have my Mana Pot available and my Arcane Torrent, and then my Mana Tea cooldown is about 45 seconds right now, so we're actually looking okay. Another way to save mana too is to use your Thunder Focus Tea and use it with Vivify because that makes it mana free, and that will actually save you quite a bit of mana in the long run in this gauntlet. Because these adds are tiny, I decided that I was going to save Crane. I did go a little bit but I am able to use my Quantum Device to give me some mana just to salvage the pull. Right after this Gloom Squall, I decided I wanted to go back into range for a little bit. I don't really have a whole lot of mana, and if I don't have mana, I'm not doing anything, so I'm just going to stand out in range to avoid getting hit by that Cleave Bleed. I'm taking advantage of my time out here to make sure that there are no storming spawning near me. I know that my tank is safe, so I'm going to go ahead and use the Drinking Mana Pot that you'll see some players use in Raid. This will give you quite a bit of mana just to get through the next pack, so you can continue the gauntlet without having to sit and wait for passive regen. This portion of the gauntlet was a little bit harder for us because we don't have a Venthyr player, so we're not able to use these lanterns that make this pull much easier, this and the following. So that's a little bit unfortunate, but we do manage to make it through this part. Going into this last pull without drinking here, I am applying my hots, and we will be using Essence Font for that extra hot before popping Mana Tea and Crane. We're going to be pretty much just spinning constantly here, just trying to get all of those envelopings out, trying to do as much damage as we possibly can so we can get down and drink faster. After we kill these dogs, we're going to take advantage of the combat drop and we're going to sit and get as close as we can to a full drink off. We are a little bit pressed for time here, so we do need to hurry. Once again, once combat drops, we're going to take advantage to drink before this next pack and then Prideful. With this Prideful, you can be fairly liberal with your cooldowns. I think I decided to hold all of mine here, except for Crane, but you obviously can do whatever you would like as long as you get through it. The next boss isn't super healer intensive, hoping that you get good spawns and good RNG and good dodges on all of the bleeds. You should be just fine using cooldowns on this Pride. Alright, and we are very pressed for time here, so what we're going to go ahead and do is Lust on Pull. I've dropped my Transcendence at the door, so I'm going to bait away the charge here, and I'm going to wait, and then Transcend so I can dodge that bleed. That will help your healer so much in the long run, so they can end up utilizing all of that time that they would normally be healing. They can put that into damage instead. I got to a point here where the charges and the beams going across was a little bit scary. I wasn't super confident in being able to transcend these, so I just end up eating them, just making sure that I'm dodging the beams just to stay alive for the sake of the timer. Headed in for this Gloom Squalor. Boomkin got hit by a Storming and was unable to make it into the shield, so we ended up having to battle res him. I couldn't get one off here because I got the charge, but then our mage ended up being able to use his engineering B-res on him. I did transcend that bleed, but I took the beam instead. Normally I prefer just to play it safe, but with having one down, I really just wanted to make it through the rest of the fight. Again, you can see here I use Expel Harm. Please don't underestimate the value of that ability, especially if you're using the Conduit like I am. It has saved me in so many places that I normally would have died. It's just not a great heal, it's not a big heal, but sometimes it's all you need just to live. Got about 5 seconds left on the timer, and our lovely friend, the full moon, comes in from the Convoke just as I pop Crane. We've got 0.7 seconds left on our timer, and we do time the key. Overall, very difficult key for Mistweavers. Doesn't make it any easier that it's on a storming week by any means. So I was happy with the way this went. There was a couple of unfortunate deaths with the graphical error or with the storming and the traps, as you saw earlier, but overall I wouldn't have changed a whole lot about the way that I did this run, just a couple minor things here and there. That is it for the 21 Sanguine depths on a Mistweaver. Thank you guys so much for watching. All of my contact info will be down below if you have any extra questions or want to check out the stream, but I will see you guys in the next video.